She's running through gold, slow and sticky, shines even when the weather's dreary.
Hello and welcome to English for Always. In this video, we're gonna carry on chapter 5 and 6 of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now let's start.
In the darkest hour.
Chapter 5. A Surprise for Beth. Laurie and the 4 girls were soon great friends. Mr. Brooke complained to the old gentleman that his children were always running across to see the marches. "Let him have a bit of a holiday," said Mr. Lawrence. "He can catch up with his studies later." What good times they had, writing and acting plays, happy evenings at the marches, and little parties at the big house. Alice Beth were too shy to go there. When Mr. Lawrence heard about Beth's shyness, he came to have tea with their mother one day and began to talk about music and great singers he had heard. Beth found it impossible to stay in her corner and came to listen. "Laurie hasn't much time for his music," Mr. Lawrence told Mrs. March, "so the piano is not used very often. Could any of your girls like to play this sometimes? They needn't see or speak to anyone, and I'll be in my study." He got up to go. "But if they don't want to come?" At this moment, a little hand touched his own. It was Beth. I want to come," she said, her voice shaking. "Very much." "You're the musical girl," said Mr. Lawrence, gently. "I'm Beth. Yes, I love music, and I shall come." The next day, Beth waited until the old and the young gentleman both went out. Then she ran across to the big house and found her way to the room with the beautiful piano. As soon as she began to play, she forgot her fears immediately in the delight which the music gave her. After that, Beth went every day. She never knew that Mr. Lawrence often opened his study door to hear her playing, or that Laurie stood in the hall to keep the servants away from the shy little girl. But she was so grateful that she asked her mother and sisters to help her make the old gentleman a pair of slippers. After several days' careful sewing, the slippers were finished. Then Beth wrote a short letter and, with Laurie's help, left it with the slippers in the old man's study one morning before he was up. The next day, Beth went out for a walk, and when she came back, the others were waiting for her. "Here's a letter for you, Beth," they called out. "Come and read it." She hurried to the house, and they took her into the front room. "Look there!" everyone was saying at once. Beth looked and got the biggest surprise of her life, for there stood a lovely little piano with a letter on top of it, addressed to Miss Elizabeth March. You read it, Joe," whispers Beth. "I can't." So Joe opened the letter and began to read. "Dear Miss March," she read, "I have many pairs of slippers, but none of which have pleased me so much as yours. I should like to thank you for your kindness by sending you something that once belonged to my little granddaughter who died. With many thanks, I am your good friend, James Lawrence." Joe put an arm around her sister. "Now try it, Beth," she said. Beth sat down and began to play, and everyone thought it was the most perfect piano they had ever heard. "You have to go and thank him," said Joe, with a smile. knowing that Bet were much too shy to do anything like that. But Beth surprised them all. "I'll do it at once," she said bravely, and away she walked. Through the garden and into the big house next door, she went up to the old gentleman's study and knocked on the door. "Come in," said Mr. Lawrence. Beth went in. "I came to say thank you, sir," she began in her quiet little voice. But he looked so friendly that she ran and put both her arms around his neck and kissed him. The old gentleman was so surprised that he nearly fell off his chair, but he was very pleased indeed by that shy little kiss, and soon the two of them were talking like old friends. Later, he walked home with Beth. The girls, watching with great interest from the window, could not believe their eyes. "Well," Meg said, "I do believe the world is coming to an end."
She's staring right through, soft and giddy, dreams even when she's looking busy. Yeah, staring right through.
Chapter 6. Amy in Trouble. "Where are you going?" Amy asked Meg and Joe one afternoon. "I want to come too." "You can't, dear. You're not invited," said Meg. "You're going somewhere with Gloria. I know you are." "Yes, we are," said Joe. "Now stop annoying us." "You're going to the theater," Amy said suddenly. "I want to go with you." "We could take her, I suppose," began Meg. "No, Laurie only invited us," said Joe. "I shall go," shouted Amy. "Meg says I can." "You just stay where you are," said Joe angrily. "I'll make you sorry for this, Joe's Marge," Amy shouted as Meg and Joe left the house. The two older sisters enjoyed themselves at the theater, but Joe couldn't stop worrying as she wondered what Amy would do to make her sorry. She found out the next afternoon. Beth, Amy, and Meg were sitting together when Joe ran into the room. "Had anyone taken my notebook?" Joe asked. Meg and Beth said, "No," at once, but Amy said nothing. "Amy, you've got it," said Joe. "No, I haven't," said Amy. "That's a lie," said Joe. "Tell me the truth, or I'll make you." "Do what you like," said Amy. "You'll never see your stupid book again because I burned it." Joe's face went white. "What?" "But I worked so hard writing my stories." "I said I'll make you sorry, and I have," said Amy. Joe jumped at Amy and shook her shoulders. "You wicked, wicked girl!" cried Joe. "I'll never, ever forgive you!" And she ran out of the room. Mrs. Marsh came home and heard the story. "Oh, how could you do that, Amy?" she said. "That was Joe's book of stories. She wrote them all herself and were hoping to make them good enough to print." Slowly, Amy began to understand the terrible thing she had done and started to cry. Later, when Joe appeared for tea, Amy begged her sister to forgive her. "I shall never forgive you," Joe answered. It was not a happy evening, and when singing time came, Joe remained silent. Afterwards, she kissed her mother and said good night. "My dear, don't go to bed feeling so angry with your sister," whispered Mrs. March. "I'm sorry, Mother, I can't forgive her," replied Joe. Next day, Joe wanted to get out of the house, So she picked up her skates and went next door to Aunt Gloria to take her skating. Amy heard them going. "Jo promised to text me with her next time," she complained. "It's hard for her to forgive you, Amy," said Meg. "Go after them and wait until Jo is enjoying herself and give her a kiss or do something kind." It was not far to the river, but Jo and Gloria were already skating when Amy arrived. Jo saw Amy but turned away. Gloria was carefully skating along the edge of the ice and didn't see the younger girl. Amy put her skates on and stood on the ice. "Keep near the edge. The ice isn't safe in the middle," Gloria called to Jo. Then he disappeared round the first bend in the river. Jo heard, but Amy did not. Jo realized that Amy probably hadn't heard, but she said nothing and skated after Gloria. "Let Amy look after herself," Jo thought. Amy skated out towards the smoother ice in the middle of the river. Jo reached the bend, and for a moment she stood still, a strange feeling in her heart. Something made her turn round, just in time to see Amy throw up her hands and go crashing through the ice into the cold water. Amy gave a cry that made Jo's heart stop with fear. She tried to call Gloria, but her voice was gone, and for a second she could only stand and stare at the little blue hood of Amy's coat above the black water. Suddenly, Gloria skated past her and shouted, "Bring a piece of wood from the side of the river, quickly!" Wild with fear, Jo fetched wood and pulled it across the ice, while Gloria held Amy's head above the water. Together they got her out. She was more frightened than hurt and was quickly taken home. They covered her in blanket and tried to calm her, and after a little while she fell asleep in front of the warm fire. Later, when everything was quiet, Jo asked her mother, "Are you sure she's safe?" "Quite safe, dear. It was sensible to get her home as quickly as you did." "Gloria did it all," said Jo. "Mother, if she should die, it will be my fault. I get angry so quickly. Oh, why can't I be more like you?" "I get angry nearly every day of my life, Jo," said Mrs. March, "but I've learned not to show it. I learned to stop myself saying the angry words that come to my lips, and you must try to do the same, my dear." Amy moved in her sleep, and Jo looked at her. "I refused to forgive her, and today she nearly died, and it was Laurie who saved her. How could I be so wicked?" Jo began to cry. Then Amy opened her eyes and held out her arms. With a smile that went straight to Jo's heart, neither of them said a word, but they held each other close, and everything was forgiven and forgotten.
Running wild with the wind.
Amy was so lucky, and thanks to this accident, Jo and Amy was peace again. And what happened next to the four Marches sisters? Let's wait until the next video. Please give me a like, a share, and a subscribe for my channel. Thank you a lot, and goodbye.